And for some people, audacity is stepping away from carpe diem, just a
Mhm.
scotch,
That's right.
and
That's right.
carpe el momento, or the silence, or calm, or tranquility, and
Yes.
that's audacious.
Yeah.
Yes, to have
Yes.
the audacity to say, whatever it is that I'm doing isn't serving me, or this is
Right.
not how I aspire to have my life. It doesn't look like a particular thing, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be big and bold. It
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
be quiet and calm and
Yes.
internal and peaceful, is just as audacious for some people as something that's big and bold.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to help you live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and I genuinely appreciate you for spending time out of your valuable day to join us. Together, we'll dive into the art of audacity, exploring its many facets and how it really can transform your life. Now, think of audacity as a spectrum, much like colors on a painter's palette. For one person, audacity might mean boldly stepping into the spotlight, while for another person, it could be quietly embracing solitude and self-reflection. Just as every hue contributes to a masterpiece, each person's expression of audacity adds to the richness of the human experience. However, the danger of comparison lurks in the shadows, tempting us to measure our audaciousness against others instead of celebrating our unique journeys. That's where self-compassion comes in. By recognizing that our paths are distinct, we can cultivate a deeper appreciation for our own growth in this. And now, in this episode, we're going to explore the profound power of storytelling in shaping our experiences as well as our identities. The narratives we construct both about ourselves and the world around us have the ability to either empower us or to hold us back. We'll discover strategies for diffusing negative narratives and rewriting our personal stories with intention, empowering us to reclaim our voices and live authentically. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Lindsey Carnick. She's a licensed psychotherapist and founder of Onward Psychological Services. Lindsey is a passionate advocate for mental health as well as personal growth, specializing in helping individuals as well as couples navigate their own unique challenges. With her extensive experience in storytelling and the human experience, she brings a wealth of knowledge to our conversation. Lindsey's insights are particularly relevant to today's episode as we explore the relativity of audacity, the dangers of comparison, and the importance of self-compassion. Her expertise in narratives will add depth to our discussion on how, we can reshape our stories to align with our true selves. So now that we've got you all set, let's turn to our conversation with Lindsey. Enjoy. Hey, Lindsey, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Audley. I'm so glad to be here. What a great title, The Audacious Living. Shouldn't we always live audaciously? I love that.
Yeah, it's just something that made sense for me, and but more importantly, it was something I really wanted to encourage in others. I think we've all got that thing inside of us that kind of directs us or guide us, but we don't always hear it, or maybe we don't listen to it, or we hold back. And so really it's really being intentional about listening to that and being audacious, because we've all got our own predetermined paths that we're supposed to go down. But if we're not living audacious, then we're not going down that path. We're holding ourselves back and we're not living our full lives as I see it. And so, yeah, it just makes sense that is the way to go. That's the way to live. And that's what we encourage here with as many listeners as we possibly can.
All right.
Now, you come at this in a slightly I was going to say different angle, but as more from a physiotherapist or psychotherapist standpoint rather, and you really promote again the same idea of living your life through the context of stories. And we all know how powerful stories are in terms of maybe how we make sense of the world, how we view the world, how we understand the world. I think that a really, really good starting point. So maybe I can invite you to introduce yourself to our audience, explain a little bit about the work that you do and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Well, as you said, I'm a psychotherapist, so I'm a mental health therapist, and I have a private practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm licensed in 10 states, so I see adult individuals and couples across 10 states.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a fair amount of speaking, conventions, keynotes, workshops, this sort of thing. And I am, as you point out, really interested in stories and the audacity of stories. And I think audacious is such an interesting word because it's so relative, right? For one person, audacious might mean breaking a mold. And breaking a mold doesn't necessarily look like breaking out. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that looks like settling in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
has audacious really, I think, refers to something that is perhaps not the easy route, maybe not a route that's been laid down by someone else or something else, but is challenging, right? There's something challenging about
Right.
it. And challenging is very relative, right? For some people, it's very challenging to slow down and let go, right?
Right.
As opposed to
Right.
hit the gas. And I think
Right.
sometimes we think of it as like, oh, I need to be bigger, badder, bolder, better, or see, carpe diem kind of a thing. And for some people, audacity is stepping away from carpe diem just a
Mm-hmm.
scotch,
That's right.
and
That's right.
carpe el momento, the silence or calm or tranquility. And
Yes.
that's audacious,
Yeah.
yes, to
Yes.
have the audacity to say, whatever it is that I'm doing isn't serving me, or this is
Right.
not how I aspire to have my life. It doesn't look like a particular thing, right? It doesn't have to be big and bold. It
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
be quiet and calm and
Yes.
internal and peaceful, is just as audacious for some people as something that's big and bold. So, as you mentioned, stories, those are deciding what is audacious for each of us, right? Relative to where we come from
Very
and the stories
individualized.
we've told and we've been told and that we've identified with, is a very individual, personal sort of
Yes.
project.
Yes. Yes. Well, and oftentimes, as we're going along our path, we'll look to the right, we'll look to the left, we'll see people doing all these things. We're going, hey, what about me? And maybe we
Mm.
adopt or we want to take and not that we can't learn from others. So I don't want to suggest that no, don't look what other people are doing. I think you can look and adopt and take even, but it still has to be in line with who you are and where
Mm.
you're going, right? And where your path is leading you. I think that, and that's why the comparison is such a dangerous trap to get into because of what it can do. And so I think about that. And as also, I'm very glad that you made the point about the audacity being breaking out for sure, or breaking into a mold, right? It's not the loudest person in the room. Oh, he's the most audacious because he's the loudest one, right? It's not that at all. It's stepping into who you were meant to be.
So true. That's so resonates with me what you just said about comparison. My husband and I were talking the other day, and we were opining that it's helpful to be a water skier.
Okay.
Most of the water goes out behind you,
Okay.
right, when you're water skiing, and being able to let things flow by you without getting wet is really, really helpful, because otherwise everything that comes at you, right, you're going, oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I should be doing that. Oh,
Right.
this is the thing. That is and you will literally be pulled into so many directions. It's a existential drawn and quartered, right? You will
Right.
literally just be like, boom, because especially with how much we're exposed to currently, you could literally just keep spinning in circles
Yes.
with this sense of comparison and this sense of ought to be, or that's the thing, or this is the thing, because there's just an infinite amount of that. And you have to be able to filter through that, to
Yeah.
your point, and say, oh, this thing over here, this nugget resonates with me and is in alignment with my values about living and humanity and who I am and who I want to be and who I
Right.
aspire to be and all of those things. And to be able to let the rest just go on by, because otherwise we will all be an absolute constant hostages to
Yes.
comparison and the number of things that one could be doing at any given time in
Yep.
all the
Yep.
different domains.
Yep. Yep.
It's
It's
quite
funny as you.
intimidating, quite
Well, it
overwhelming.
is. It's funny. As you were talking, I'm thinking, yeah, like self-compassion, like have compassion for ourselves and where we are, as opposed to going, oh, ought, I should. Those are those types of words that will kill you because they'll beat you up and make you think that you're in the wrong place, as opposed to recognizing that where you are is kind of where you're supposed to be, right? Like I liken it to, like I truly feel that, our lives are a collection of experiences. And
Mm,
those experiences help fuel us, help us again understand, help give us build our resilience, our tolerance, all of these things that experiences do for us. And so, if I haven't had the experience that Solly or Tom had, then of course I'm not where they're at because I haven't gone through what they've gone through. But conversely, they haven't done what I've done either, right? And so that's where it really comes owning my path and owning my journey is really what I think is important here.
yes, I agree. And also accepting the the reality, right? That in the same way you and I can't be standing in two cities at once.
Right.
When you open and walk through one door, correct, you cannot open and walk through other doors at the same time. And that's what makes things precious, is that it's not unlimited. Yes, that when you commit to anything, whether that's a small commitment or a large commitment, you are you are saying, I understand I'm making this commitment, and that by the necessity of physics, time, and space, that excludes other things. You cannot walk through door A and door F at the same time. I suppose there are situations in which maybe one gets to re-choose and maybe try door F 10 years later, depending on the scenario.
Yep.
But for the most part, we have to accept that the opportunity of walking through doors comes with loss. The loss is if you walk through door A, you don't get to walk through door D at the same time, and
That's
that's
right.
okay, right? Because if we spend our time regretting and sort of angsting over not choosing a door because we're afraid of missing out on B, C, D, E, F, G when
Yep.
we walk through A, then we just become sitting ducks, right? Then we
Gotcha.
are simply suspended in space and paralyzed by the reality that none of us are going to get to do all the things.
Mm.
Somebody
No.
asked me about FOMO recently. We were talking about FOMO,
Okay.
and she said, she says, doesn't it, it was so funny the way it came out. She said, doesn't it bother you that because we were doing X, we weren't doing Y? And I said, no, every minute of every day, I could be doing something other than what I'm doing. I could be doing a
Right.
100,000 things other than, right. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast,
That's
right?
right. That's
And if
right.
you let yourself get sucked into that maximizer mindset, right, of like, golly, I better pick the top option of the million things
Yeah.
I could be
That's
doing
that's
right
right.
now, you will be
That's right.
paralyzed. You will
That's
be
right.
absolute paralyzed and you will not live any life.
That's right. That's right. It's funny as you mentioned FOMO. I remember once having a conversation with someone as well, and the top FOMO came up, and I said, I'm too busy living an audacious life to have FOMO, man. I don't know what you're talking about, right? And
Oh,
that's
that's
but
great.
but it really is like if I'm so I mean put it this way, if I'm doing the things that charge me, the things that get me excited, I'm passionate about, I love doing, I never get tired doing them, then what am I missing out on?
Right.
Like what's left after that? Like
Yes.
I'm where I'm supposed to be, right? And so
Yes.
I don't know. I barely can spell FOMO, never mind experiences. So there we go.
It's so true. And also there's a wonderful parable, and there are a couple different versions of it, but here's a version. There's a parable about these two friends who grow up they're born on the same day, and they grow
Okay.
up in this very small village, right? And they're two young boys, and the one boy says, I'm getting out of here as soon as possible. I got to get out of this joint, right? And sure enough, as soon as he can get away, he does. And he lives all over the world and has these fantastic travels and lives in a million different cities and all the things. And the other little boy stays in their village where they grew up,
Yeah.
right? And at the end of their lives, they're old men and they're sitting in rocking chairs side by side, and they're having this debate about who chose better. Which
Okay.
one was better? And ultimately, what of course they realize is that you can't have both of those experiences, that there's something truly special about having a lifetime relationship with a place. I mean, that's
Mm,
really special,
yes. Yeah.
right? And if you live all over the world or whatever, you don't get that special experience of living in
Right.
one place. You got a different special
Yes.
experience, right?
Yes.
And if
Yes.
you have that special experience, you don't get the first one, right? You both
Right.
had remarkably special experiences. And it is because of their mutual exclusivity that they're so special,
Special.
right? And
Yes.
I think it's easy for us to
Beautiful.
forget that
Yeah.
because we're marketed to the allure constantly of doing something different or switching it up. And so we're very subject to the sense of like, oh my gosh, what if this thing I'm doing right now is not the most
Yeah.
special, fantastic thing I could be doing? And the honest answer is, well, that's completely possible, but it doesn't make it a bad thing to be doing.
That's right. That's right. Right. And what you're doing now isn't less important or less impactful or less meaningful.
Right.
I don't know, we'll talk about stories here in a moment, but I think it's so important as we go through our experiences that we own them, right? And we accept
Mm,
and own them because you never know who you'll encounter, who you'll embark, that you can share that story or that experience with that could, aid them. And I mean, for example, you could be going through something traumatic and difficult and challenging as the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And then you meet someone else that went through this similar, if not same experience. They're like, oh yeah, here's what I did. And I was done. And after that was over. And you're like, wow, because in that moment, you're thinking no one else on the planet has any idea what this feels like, knows what you're going through. And yet you meet someone that does. And not only have they experienced it, they told you how they got through it. And so
mm.
for me, I think stories are very, very powerful. The caution is what parts of the stories that you choose to tell. So for a lot of people, they'll tell the stories and they'll end at the tragedy, right? And I'm going, wait a
Mm.
second, what did you get out of it? Who did it help? Who helped you? Where did you go? What was the lessons you learned? Like resources you tap into? Like all of these things are where the real story begins. And so I'm a really big fan of stories. I'd love to hear sort of when you sort of understood the power and started being intentional about stories.
Ooh. Well, I've always, as long as I can remember, loved stories. I've always been a
Mhm.
story junkie. I mean,
Okay.
from the word go. I loved books.
Hmm.
But not just books. I love stories from anybody who would tell them to me. Anybody. And so I think I always had stories in my life.
Okay.
My parents are very creative people. And I think that is really where my love of stories started. And I was really fortunate to be introduced at a fairly young age to a series of books that were profoundly impactful for me, that were these wonderful stories.
Hmm.
And I actually had my dad did this amazing thing for me. He linked me to the author when I was like 8. And I had a pen pal relationship with this
Wow.
author of these books
Wow.
that I so cherished.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really, really
Wow. That's very cool.
remarkable. Oh, it was so cool. It was the coolest.
Yeah.
I think I can't encourage parents enough if you have the opportunity to connect your kid to an author that they admire the books of. It's just a
Yes.
really interesting, creative, wonderful experience. Um, anyway, so I've always loved stories, and I think,
Yes.
as I've gotten older and started to be, or started to become more aware of the way that stories really shape our lives and the way that we see and interpret and make meaning out of information. We're meaning making machines, right? I
Mhm.
mean, everything. We make meaning out of whether that's something like an omen, right? Or a
Yep.
good
Yep.
sign or a bad sign. Is it something as simple as I found a penny? It's good. It's going to be a good day. That's a story. I'm not saying it's true or false. I'm just saying it's a story. It doesn't make
Yep.
it fable, although
Right.
it could be. And, we make stories out of other people's behavior. We make
Yes.
stories out of our own behavior. This person's behavior means this about them. My behavior in this way, or what I'm thinking or doing, means this about me and my history. And as we age and we have more sophisticated storytelling capacities, our stories get more complicated,
Yep. That's
right?
right.
Maybe more sophisticated, dubious, but definitely more complicated,
Sometimes more
right?
creative too, right? Like,
Yes, yes, it's so true. I mean, it's funny, right? If you think about like a story that a little kid tells, right? Like a tall
sure.
tale, a fish tale, right? I mean, you go, oh, that's pretty fantastical, right? But then you think about some of the stories you've told yourself over the years. And you're like, no, that's equally fantastical.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe fewer fantastical elements per se, but
Yeah.
definitely thematically fantastical.
I literally like 2 weeks ago, I heard someone say an expression. It's funny. We're talking about this now. He talked about storytelling, and he says the key is you never mess up a good story with facts. I just thought it was the most funniest thing.
It's so true. It's so true.
So
And
that's like,
we get older and we make up these stories and we resolve the
that's,
dissonance between the facts with
oh yeah,
filling
oh yeah,
in
oh
all
yeah.
kinds of ideas that may or may not be anywhere close to what's actually happening,
That
right?
is funny. That is funny.
And then you add in a little emotional reasoning. If it
Sure.
feels true, it is true. And now
Mhm.
we've really got
Now
some
we're somewhere
interesting
else now,
stuff.
right? Yeah. The train that
Yeah.
was going east is now going west, right? Like,
100%. And maybe like at a Z vector off the planet, like the train may have left the surface of the Earth.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Uh-huh.
And we see nothing wrong with it. Yeah, it was perfectly
No,
fine.
not at all. But I guess one of the things is that I love and that always resonates with me, always has, and I assume always will, is that sometimes, no matter how fantastical the stories are,
Mhm.
in a way, they speak the truth more accurately than we can, right?
Okay.
I mean, we make up fables to explain concepts to kids, right? Because
Gotcha.
the allegorical quality, you talk about the lion and the rabbit, or whatever, the kid goes, "Oh yeah, I see it," right? It's easier to see the truth in the fiction sometimes when it's wrapped in fiction. It
Yep.
becomes very, very obvious. And that's why parables and fables are so popular, right? Or even fairy tales. Yes, Grimm's fairy tales. You go, "Oh yeah, don't go in the woods by yourself." Got it. Right? Okay, copy that. So I love the idea, and maybe this is just the story nerd in me, but I think it's important nonetheless, that sometimes when we're unable to articulate our truth directly, we find these other ways to do it through
Right.
these stories we tell about ourselves and our families and the people around us and the world around us.
Yep.
And it always speaks to a truth, even when the facts are ridiculous. And I love that. I love that we've figured out how to do that and that we are these creatures that deeply desire to be understood.
Yep.
And when we can't make ourselves understood, we turn to this mode that is pointing to the truth, if not describing it.
Right.
I think that's so compelling. I never get sick of that.
No, I think it is extremely compelling, and the part I think we sort of touched on earlier with respect to what stories can do, certainly can do some wonderful things for us if used correctly. But at the same time, we can be held hostage by our own stories as well too, or we can limit the way we live our lives because of a story, and sometimes the story doesn't even have to belong to us. It could belong to someone else, and that story was passed on, and I adopted it as my own. I didn't do my own fact checking, not like that. I just accepted it and moved on, and so that's a piece that gets dangerous. And I would imagine you spend a lot of time helping people work through those types of stories.
I think that's true. I think that's really accurate. And I think oftentimes stories can be inherited and they were true at a certain time, in a certain place, in a certain context, right? But that doesn't mean they are true or real for the next person who's picked up that edition, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is we pick up those stories without questioning them much, right?
Yeah.
And we just sort of take them on. And I think that's where things can go a little wonky in terms of obscuring the story of ourselves that is authentic and real to our experience, right?
Yes.
It's a little bit like, you remember, I mean, I don't want to say that I did this, but some people once upon a time would sit in class and have the textbook and then inside of that another book. And they would be reading something that was not the thing that they were supposed to.
I knew someone that did that too. Yeah,
You knew people? You knew people. Yeah. Yeah, I did too. Lots. And I think that's sort of representative in some ways of what people experience, right? Their own story is somehow embedded inside this larger text, right? And they're desperately looking for ways to set down that exterior text that is sort of obscuring their own storyline, right? Or keeping them from writing their own storyline.
Gotcha.
And maybe that's the other thing, right? Is that we don't often realize that we have the power to pick up the pen any day so to speak, and start writing a new chapter, a new edition, a new story from
Yep.
scratch. It doesn't matter. You can literally, I'm a writer to some degree, and I'll tell you something, for anybody who doesn't write or is intimidated by writing. One of the greatest things about writing is you can chuck that crap whenever you want. You can
Right.
literally delete, you can
Yep.
burn, you can purge, you can shred. You don't have to stick with something you started, right? You stick with a
Right.
piece of writing and it's just not working for you. You just get rid of it.
Right.
You don't
Right.
hang
Right.
on to it just because you already managed to knock out 5,000 words. No, right to the
Right.
shred bin if it's
Right.
not
Right.
working. But we cling to these old stories because we're invested in how much work we've put into them, just like writers cling to verbiage that they've churned out, even if it's garbage, because they put so
Gotcha.
much work into it.
That is funny. That is funny. So then let's sort of get into or talk about then the rewriting of these stories, right? We know they don't serve us. We know that we probably know they're not true, whether we want to admit it or not, right? We know that
Right.
there's issues with adopting these stories or being held hostage to these stories. What's the process or what sort of steps we got to do to rewrite them?
Hmm. Well, I think like so many things, awareness that it's happening is
Mm,
usually the biggest part, right? And it's always interesting to me, and I certainly put myself in this category. Many of us over the years have developed sort of self-deprecating, what I call point outs. We'll point to the thing. A very common one is when somebody will be like, oh, I'm the black sheep of the family. They'll joke about something like that. So they point to a storyline, but in being self-deprecating or joking about it, they are minimizing how much that actually influences their life.
mm,
It's a fake sort of like, oh, I see it. Of course, I'm aware of that. But are you? Are you really? Right? Because I think maybe not. And so, truly being curious about to what degree I think any of us at any given moment are playing out a script
right.
or a narrative that is not, forget where it came from for a second. That's a whole nother ball of wax,
Yep.
is not congruent or in alignment with who we are or who we aspire to be or what our values are. Just the realization is tremendously freeing, right? Because once you can point to something, like you can say that's a story.
Yep.
When the act of pointing creates distance, even if
Gotcha.
my finger is only, I don't know how long my finger is, 3 inches, 3.5 inches, even if it's only 3.5 inches, as soon as you can point to something like a
Yep.
story you've been telling yourself,
Hmm.
right, you have distanced yourself from it,
Right.
even if it's
Right.
just by a
Right.
finger length, right? And once you've distanced yourself from it, the ACT guys, acceptance and commitment therapy, call this diffusion, and it's a
Okay.
wonderful concept. Once you've created just the slightest bit of diffusion, you've pulled your forehead away from the tree. You can go, oh,
Yes.
it's a tree.
It's a tree.
Ah, wow,
That's
I
what's
had
hurting
no
me.
idea.
That's what I
Yes,
think.
that thing grinding into my forehead was tree bark.
Right.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible, right?
Right.
You have opened up literal space for yourself between you and it. And once there's space, the possibilities are endless,
Hmm.
right? Because space is all you need is a little bit of space, right? And then you can just wedge in there and create more and more and more and more and more and more, and more space on an infinite scale.
Yes. Yeah.
And the first step to creating space is diffusing from that thing. Just just a hair. A hair is space. It counts. If there's airflow,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
counts.
Wedge that in there. Wedge that in there. Yeah.
Yes. And that questioning of what is this? Is this a story? Whose story is it? What are the component parts? And also maybe being open to the idea that often these narratives are not wholly out of alignment with who we are.
Yep.
Sometimes there are nuggets, and occasionally if we get into that all or nothing thinking, we end up cutting off our noses to spite our
Like
faces, right? You
this.
go like, oh, well, that's a story my mother had about no, 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 no. Well, okay, yeah, but you probably got some good stuff from her too. So
Sure.
just let's
Sure.
we baby with the bathwater. Let's be careful of that, right? Like, but it's not until we can defuse from it and then
What's up?
look at it that we can start to be intentional about the parts that we want to keep that
Mm-hmm.
are in alignment with our
Yep.
values and who we
Yeah.
see ourselves to be, and the parts that aren't serving us anymore if they ever did.
That's right. Yeah. No,
Right?
I do.
And to
Yeah.
those parts, you remember Marie Kondo, the organizing lady? Remember that gal?
No.
Marie Kondo had a show. First, she had a book And then she had a show, I don't know what, I think maybe HGTV or something.
Okay.
But she was this organizing guru.
Okay.
And not
Okay. Sounds
only
familiar.
that, but I believe she came from a Shinto perspective. I believe it was Shinto. Please, nobody quote me on that. But she came from this perspective that when things no longer serve you, you thank them. You thank them for what they did for you in the past,
Yes.
and then you set them free. You move them on to somebody else who they might help now that they're not helping you. But
Yes.
it's done with respect and affection as opposed to disgust.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yes.
often we're quick to be disgusted about parts of our story. We go, oh, I can't believe I fill in the blank, right? Oh, I can't believe I. And there's a sort of disgust and self-loathing or self-critique. And wouldn't it be an amazing experience if we could hold with compassion these
Yes.
things about our story or our past and go, oh, my goodness, at one point in time, that really felt like it kept me safe. And
Right.
now it doesn't do that anymore. So I'm going to honor
Yep.
that that's what I was doing at the time, and it was the best I had at my disposal at the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And I'm going to let that go with
Yeah.
a sense of gratitude and respect, not a sense of like disgust and
That's
violence.
right.
I got
That's
to
right.
not be like that
Yeah.
anymore,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which
I
is
love the perspective.
intrinsically violent.
No, I love the perspective. I really, really do, because it's that you taking a step back and compassion, exercising compassion for yourself, and saying, okay, that's where I was at that time. And it's so funny because you really think how many times you'll reflect on past decisions. You're like, what was I thinking, right? Well, what you were thinking is what you had at that time. You didn't have the benefit of every other experience afterward that informed you that maybe that wasn't the best decision, but at that time when you didn't know better, it was pretty good. Right?
Of course, you did the best you could with whatever internal and external resources and constraints were
Yes.
operating in that moment, right?
Right.
Nobody doesn't do the best they can given
Right.
what's going on in that moment. And I think
Right.
sometimes when people are giving themselves a tremendously hard time about, decisions they regret or behaviors that they have some guilt about, these sorts of things, they keep going, I knew better, I should have known better, I that's not who I am, da, 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 da.
Right.
And you go, that's probably all true. I absolutely agree with you. And also, I and you both know you are not Jack the Ripper.
Right.
So if you made that decision then, okay, not your finest moment, but whatever moment it was for you, that was the finest you had,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
right?
okay.
Even if it wasn't your finest,
Right.
whatever it was limiting you from being the version of yourself you would most like
Yeah.
to be. We
Yeah.
just are going to have to appreciate that there were limits that
That's right.
inhibited you from doing what you knew you should have done. Because
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
had not been inhibited, you would have, right?
That's right. That's right.
And
That's
that's the way it was. And so starting now, how do you aspire to show up? How can you cultivate with intention those ways of being in the world that are in alignment with your story about yourself, that
right.
are in alignment with your values, that are congruent with who you are and the people you respect and the things that you want to be, right? And you can start doing that at any second of the day.
Yes. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. I wanted to share something with you. This, and it sort of fits in an earlier part of our conversation where we were talking about, audacity and boldness. And there's what I call the bold framework that I developed, and essentially it's an acronym BOLD. But essentially, this bold framework will help you live your best audacious life, and it's really essentially made up of 4 components. The B stands for better than yesterday, and it's really about the concept of learning. So and constant development, and so you climbed that mountain yesterday, and it was fantastic, and I hope you celebrated. I hope you felt good about the experience and your accomplishments. But what you can do tomorrow, because there's another mountain that's bigger than the one you did yesterday. Can you climb that one? So it's really constantly not getting comfortable or getting settled in what you've done, but more moving on to the next. The O in the framework stands for outlast adversity, and we all know that there will be challenges in life. They are going to come. We may not get someone may not knock at your door at 3:00 and say, here's what's going to happen at 4:00. You're not going to get the advance notice kind of a thing. But it's how you survive that, and how you survive that is you outlast it, because the tough times don't stay forever, as we all know. The element framework is live your truth, and it's really pointing to be authentic in who you are. So we talked earlier about being on your own path and not Sally's or Tom's. It's living your truth and what is destined for you. And the last letter D is disrupt the norm. And you're going to have to go off that beaten path. You're going to have to try something that's never been done before. I oftentimes use the illustration of the Wright brothers learning how to fly and build a plane. And I'm sure there are people that thought they were crazy. What are you doing? Flying is for the birds. But they did it anyways. And so I think so bearing that in mind, that framework, it really allows you to trust in yourself, understand the perspective of life, that look, things are rocky now, so there's life's a series of hills and valleys, and so the hills where things are great and the valleys where it's not so good, and knowing that they are going to come, because life is a continuum. So instead of staying in the valley and lamenting about how terrible it is, figure out how to get back on top of that hill. And I think once we can do that, and bearing in mind the elements of that framework, that can allow you to live your best audacious life.
I love that. I love all of that.
Yeah, no.
What a great framework.
Well, and it makes sense. Thank you. It really does make sense from the standpoint of understanding, well, first off, yourself and kind of what direction you want to be going into, because and it's not one of these things where you follow step by step. You can jump in anywhere and based on where you're at, right? Maybe you're already living authentically, and maybe you are being who you're supposed to be. That's not your issue. It's when tough times come along, you curl up in a ball. So maybe that's your starting point, right? So it's going to be different for every single one. But I mean, if you think about that's we look at everything we've been talking about has been about that. It's different for every single one of us. Not the same.
Yes, and that's the other reason why comparison is so unhelpful, right? Is not just that it's sort of psychologically destructive, but that it isn't. It's apples and elephants, right? Yeah. It's really apples and elephants, and it's hard to see that on the outside.
Gotcha.
You have to trust that it's true.
Yeah. Trust. There's a trust word again. You work with a wide array of different individuals, not in this particular one specific client or one specific group. I wonder if you sort of talk about why you took that approach, and so as opposed to maybe specializing and focusing in one particular area.
Well, there's remarkable democracy across humanity, in the sense that many people whose lives look very different on paper are struggling with the same things. And those things may present slightly differently with a little variation in specifics. But the thematic challenges are pretty common to humanity in my experience, which I find endlessly compelling. I find that so interesting.
Yep.
And so,
as well as our reactions too, right? Aren't there?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And so I want to be intentional with what I say here, because I don't want to suggest by any stretch of the imagination that everybody's having the same difficulty, or that there isn't variation and that specialties aren't important. They are. Right. And there are some very specialty niche areas of treatment that are evidence-based and very important and can make tremendous degrees of difference for different populations and folks facing different challenges. And I think that's very important. So having said that, I am constantly impressed by how similar what's troubling people tends to be. And so I suppose it would be accurate to say that because I'm interested in human suffering and the human experience, I'm interested in humans, broadly construed.
Right across the board. Yeah.
And the ways in which that sort of shows up.
Well, and again, I joked about the reactions being the same, but I think we're far more alike and similar than we believe we are, or even think that we are.
I agree.
The function of being human is being human, and with that comes feelings and emotions that we all can relate and understand. Yes. The difference is where the difference lies, and maybe our actions and what we end up actually doing but
Mhm.
the feelings themselves is where that common red thread of commonality exists.
100%. I think the one that is impressive to me again and again and again is defensiveness.
Hmm.
I you can take a stack of people whose lives are so dramatically different on paper, right? And
Yes,
their
yes,
backgrounds and all and their experience live the thing. And defensiveness is almost universal. And that's so reassuring, right? That's
right.
so reassuring for those of us who believe that humanity is humanity one way
Yes,
or the other. And so, and I think the more we're able to say that, wow, this is a very common experience, this is a very
that's right.
ubiquitous experience, right? Gets us, to your point earlier, more in a sense of community, right? This is not a you problem. This is not a you
Yeah,
problem. This is
yeah,
not an individual level thing. This is called something humans do when
yes,
humans feel a little wounded, right?
yes,
Or humans feel a little threatened. This is
yeah,
what we do. And to your point about behavior, what I do when I'm feeling defensive might look different than what you do
yeah.
when you're feeling defensive,
That's right.
right? And
That's right.
probably different things maybe put us in that place, right? Different stimuli elicit defensiveness than in you than me, and vice versa. And also on the sort of physiological level, we're having exactly the same experience when it
That's right.
happens.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I find that so reassuring that
Yeah,
we're all in this together
yeah,
and we're all sort of trying to understand how we can help each other be more constructive
yeah,
and stay in alignment with our values when, not if,
yeah.
when we're having these completely ubiquitous human experiences. Defensiveness being one of the most interesting ones to me.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, absolutely. Defensive is a good one. The response. I don't know where this is. So when our response when bad things happen is also an interesting one as well too. How do we respond to situations that are deemed bad or perceived bad?
Mhm.
Um, and that will, across the board, that you'll see all sorts of different sort of responses that again just speak to the humanness of who we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're also, we're ingenious. I'm also very interested. I mean, there are many things I'm very interested in. Passive aggressive behavior is so interesting to
Okay.
me.
Okay.
I am so deeply not off put by it because my experience is that passive aggressive communication, or behavior, is a cry for help.
Yes.
Right? It is evidence, de facto evidence that the person cannot articulate what it is they actually want to say, so they are now speaking in code.
Mhm, mhm.
And if you can start to recognize that for what it is, as opposed to reacting to the superficial presentation and go, oh, what's wrong with you? Like I
Mhm.
was impolite, and
Right.
instead go, oh my goodness, this person is having a terrible time. In fact, they're struggling, whatever it is that's creating the struggle for them to articulate themselves in this moment is so dire for them that they just switched into code and they're
Mm,
literally speaking backwards. They are saying the thing that they don't want because they can't say the thing that they do want.
mm,
Oh, I can help them with that by
right.
being direct, by not being hooked by the sort of
Yep.
egoness that we get
Yep.
hooked by once we
Yep.
think somebody's being passive. Oh, you're being passive aggressive with me. I'll be passive aggressive, or
That's,
whatever
I'll give
reaction
it
people
back to
think.
you.
Exactly. I would dish that right back out twice folds. And
Right.
instead we can take the sort of radical leadership role in
Mm,
going, oh, this person is having a really hard time, and that's why they're doing that thing
yes.
that they're
Yes.
doing
Yes.
right now. Am I willing to, because one doesn't have to, but am I willing to stand up and sort of lead through this and show compassion to this person as opposed to taking the sort of red herring bait that is
Mm,
passive aggressive communication, right? Which creates a
yes.
whole nother storyline about something that isn't true. And now we've escalated into the land of, we're now going to have some sort of disagreement about not even the topic, because now it's going to be about the passive aggressive thing that was said,
Right.
which again is throwing us further and further away from whatever the original thing was.
Right.
And
Right.
that to me is endlessly compellingly interesting.
It's interesting because so passive aggressiveness as one side, and then you got the other type of response where people just kind of blow up in the moment and they
Aggressive, aggressive.
aggressive. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And they both do the same thing in terms of giving you insights into what's going on with someone.
Yes.
Um, in either instance, the level of empathy required to even do what you just described is extremely high, and something that, I mean, we all I'll admit, I've had instances where, like, I'm not dealing with that person because they're crazy or whatever, right? But I mean, it's I guess my point is just it's just a high level of empathy to do that, and a great thing to
Mm,
aspire to, quite frankly.
absolutely. I like to tell this, and I like to relay an anecdote that I read once.
Okay.
And tragically, I cannot find the book or the author where I read it. I know what kind of book it is. It was in the preface. I can't find the book. One day I will. At any rate, the author tells this story in which the essence of the exchange is this: she and her husband are somewhere, and they get into
Okay.
this argument that is uncharacteristic for them, right? It's got
Mhm.
a tone that is uncharacteristically negative and a little hostile, what have you, or a lot hostile by their standards.
Okay.
And they're having this argument, and the argument ends up in this parking lot of this restaurant, and they're there, and it really goes sideways. And they've been together forever, and they've never had an argument like this before. And she says something, and he says something, and she says something, and then he says something that's really sort of out of pocket by both of their
Okay.
standards, right? Like they
Okay.
both kind of go, yikes, when this comes out of his mouth. We've just gone into new territory that is real new and real scary, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then they turn around and they sort of storm off in either direction.
Right.
And some amount of time later, they literally bump back into each other, like both walked around the block or something and bumped back into each other. And they see each other, and they kind of walk towards each other, and they stop and they stare at each other, and everybody's, like, not sure what's going to happen next. Don't like the way this ended, right?
Right.
And she takes a deep breath and she says to him, "For you to have said what you said to me, you must really be hurting."
Mm. 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 I'm even thinking about, like, the response to that, right? And where that can go, and the places that can go.
Well, what's your response emotionally just hearing that? Like thinking about that happening between two people?
So if I so and I like and I'm one of those, and I'm the person hearing that message.
Just even hearing the story. You're an outside observer. Like, I mean, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
Well, it does, and again, I go back to the high level of empathy to be able to even engage in that type of conversation, right? So no, absolutely,
Right. Right. Because when
yeah,
we're hurt, we don't go, "Oh, you must be hurting too." We go, "You just hurt me. You just
that's
bit me.
right,
You
that's
just,
right,
ah." And so now we're gonna, sort of snarl back in most
yes,
cases because we just
yes,
got snarled at. And so for someone to have the level of empathy and the presence of mind, perhaps, to go, "Oh, if you just took a swipe at me, you must be like a wounded animal
mm,
right now. You must be hurt because
yes,
animals, when they're wounded, they're
that's
in
right,
pain and they
that's
will
right,
strike at you, right? They will not let you help them. They will lash back
yeah,
because they're hurting. And I find that anecdote so aspirational and
yes, oh,
so
absolutely,
motivational,
yes,
right? And so powerful
yes,
to aspire to be a person who, it's not a matter of turning the other cheek. I dislike that expression
mhm,
because she's very careful later in the book to differentiate. That wasn't the end of the conversation. You
right,
can bet they talked about what he
yeah,
said,
that's the
right?
beginning of the conversation,
That's the thing. That is an opening when it seemed closed down,
yes, yes,
right? And she recognized that in order to move through, they were going to have to reconnect in order to repair. And if
yes,
somebody takes a swipe at you, so to speak, and you go and you swipe back, you are widening the gap
that's right,
and making repair more difficult,
yes, that's right, that's
right?
right,
And so often we get caught up in this, like, well, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you, or nah, you're going to have to chase me now, right? Or nah, 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 nah. And this is only prolonging the repair process, because when you think about literally the verb repair, usually you think about repairing something. Well, I know we don't repair anything, we just get a new one off Amazon. But back in the day when people repaired things, you had to touch it. Right? You
yeah,
had to like get your little screwdriver and you got
yeah,
to touch the thing to repair the thing. Touching is connection, and
yes,
repair between humans requires connection. And
yeah,
when you back at somebody, you have created more disconnect, not less.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that story so much. It gives me it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I think about it, when I talk about it. I love telling that story.
Yeah.
Wherever that lady is. I'm sorry, I can't cite correctly because I can't remember her name or the book's title.
No, it's a beautiful one. It really, really
But it really
is.
stuck with me.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful story. It really is. It's powerful. So I appreciate. Thank you for sharing that. And
oh, my pleasure. Please share it more.
And Lindsey, thank you for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast. I really appreciated so much of you had to share your insights, your energy. Clearly, you're passionate about what you're doing, which is amazing because that will make a huge difference to the people that you're working with. And so I again appreciate you doing this. For listeners that wanted to connect with you directly or learn more about your work, where could we send them?
Oh, you can send them to Instagram. My company is called Onward Psych Services. Every week I put out a practical, tactical coping skill video, which are really fun for me. I love those so much. So I'm at Onward Psych Services, PSYCH Services. On the web, I have a website, which is onwardpsychservices.com. There's a contact me form. There's an email. You can call me. I have those rectangles. You can you can do this with it. And what? My phone number is on the website. You're welcome to give me a call at that number. I probably won't answer, but I'll call you back if it's chit-chat.
Gotcha. Well, this has been great, Lindsey. I really do appreciate this. It's a phenomenal time to start with you. Congratulations on all the great work and all the best.
Oh, Audley, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the work you're doing on this podcast. It's really important.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Back, we are here on the podcast, and during our chat with Lindsey, she shared a powerful perspective on the danger of comparison and how it can lead us to forget our own individual journeys. Her analogy of storytelling as a way to articulate our struggles resonated with me deeply. It's certainly a reminder that our experiences, while unique, can connect us in profound ways. What I personally loved about this conversation with Lindsey was her emphasis on self-compassion and the importance of recognizing our past choices as part of our growth rather than as failures. I really encourage you to connect with Lindsey directly. She's active on social media, and her website is onwardpsychservices.com. You also can find her on Instagram at Onward Psych Services, where she shares valuable insights and practical coping strategies. Certainly, I'd encourage you to be sure to check out her website for any offers or products that she can offer to you to help you in your personal journey towards audacious living. I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you've enjoyed what we've shared with you today, please take a moment to like, follow, and share with family and friends if you haven't already done so. That helps us continue to grow and reach even more listeners. Remember, you have the power to live audaciously, and it all starts with embracing your unique gifts. So keep striving for that audacious life. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.